Hello whisky fans, what would you say if I said that you could have a 16-year-old Islay single malt whisky for £35? Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? I mean, these days even a 12-year-old Islay single malt will cost you probably 30 plus, and if you're looking at something in the 16 to 18-year-old age bracket, you're probably looking at £70, 80, maybe even £100 for an original distillery bottling. So a lot of people are going to see single malt Islay whisky for £35 and think that seems like a really good bargain. Drawback is, it comes from Lidl. For anyone out there who doesn't live in Germany or the United Kingdom, who doesn't know what Lidl is, substitute Lidl for budget supermarket. Lidl is one of two of the extremely budget supermarkets here in the UK. They used to have pretty awful reputations as being full of cheap stuff that you couldn't do your full weekly shop there, and a lot of things were unfamiliar things to English people, shall we say, but their reputation has got a lot better in the recent years due to things like recessions, and to be fair, they've made a lot of effort to turn around their reputation and offer some really nice things. And I think most people in the UK now use these budget supermarkets. But one of the things that you occasionally see in Lidl and Aldi as well, the other German budget discount we have here in the UK, is some whiskies which often seem a little bit too good to be true. And the first time I really noticed this, it was probably around almost 10 years ago, and my local Lidl supermarket advertised that it was going to have a 33-year-old Mystery Malt on sale for, I think it was around £30 for a 33-year-old single malt, and the entire country completely lost its stuff. It was almost the end of the United Kingdom as a country, complete anarchy. Seriously, there were queues outside of the shops on the day of release, and it sold out instantly. As soon as the shop doors were open, the shelves were empty and it was gone, because it was just such a ridiculously good price. I never actually tried any, so I can't say if it was any good or not, but I have tried a few of the age statement mystery malts that these budget supermarkets have come out with since. In particular, I don't know if I mentioned that this one is from Lidl as opposed to Aldi, and these two here are other ones that they've produced in recent years. So this one is a 28-year-old Speyside single malt from an undisclosed distillery, and that one sold for about £50 for 28 years. And that one is a 22-year-old Islay single malt from an undisclosed distillery, and that one sold a couple of years ago for about £45 a bottle. So insanely good prices. But there are drawbacks with these whiskies, and the drawback is usually that they are 40%, usually chill filtered, usually artificially coloured, and quite often they're just not good whiskey. But the one thing that they always have in common is that they're always mystery malts. They never actually tell you what distillery they're coming from, and Lidl always brand theirs as Ben Bracken, which in my opinion sails a little bit close to the UK's laws on misleading people about where a whisky is from, because a lot of people that I've talked to, they think that Ben Bracken is a distillery, and I think that's a little bit naughty. And I've actually talked to a few people, and like semi-whiskey aficionados, and I've mentioned Bal Blair, and they've said, oh, that's the one from Lidl, isn't it? Just, it makes you cry inside a little bit, doesn't it? As a lot of you out there will know, Ben Bracken is not a distillery. It's Lidl's label, and I believe it's created by the Clydesdale Scotch Whisky Company in Glasgow, who tends to be the company that supplies almost, not all, but almost all of these whiskies to Lidl. And the Clydesdale Whisky Company in Glasgow is owned by White and Mackay, so it's the people behind Jura, Dalmore, Fettercairn and the White and Mackay blends. But where things did start to become a little bit different is with this one, which is this year's special age statement mystery malt offering from Lidl, I saw this on the shelf and I was going to give it a miss because I've had these two before and I wasn't that impressed. They're both chill filtered, unnaturally coloured, and 40% ABV. They're nice-ish whiskies, but you get the impression that it's slightly substandard stock from a distillery that they've shifted on to make a little bit of money without tarnishing their reputation. But, and I wholeheartedly blame Lidl for this, they're usually bottled at 40% ABV. Even these two, 22-year-old and 28-year-old, bottled at a minimum bottling strength. Almost 3 decades in the cask, and they choose to make it as weak as they can. Somebody should be put in prison for this. But this one here, the one that Lidl have released this year, I don't know if they've actually listened to what people are saying about this. Seems like they might have. It's bottled at 43%. And in my opinion, and hopefully a lot of people's opinion, an extra 3% above the minimum strength can make the world of difference to how a whiskey noses, but especially how it tastes, and the amount of complexity and the length and quality of the finish. So when I saw this one, even though it is a full 6 years younger than the previous age statement mystery malt from Lidl, the extra 3% made me think this might be worth a try. So let's take a look. What do we know from the label? We know that it's from the fake distillery / label of Ben Bracken, product of Scotland, matured in oak, chill filtered. And I will just point that out, that they do state that it is chill filtered as if it's some sort of good thing. I don't know if we should commend their honesty there, or if they just think that people are so stupid that they will think that that is actually a good thing. I wouldn't like to guess. But we know this is an Islay single malt Scotch whisky, distilled in copper pot stills, again, laid down in oak casks, for anyone that doesn't know, it's law that whisky has to be matured for at least 3 years in oak casks. Matured for 16 years and bottled at 43%. Apart from that, there's some tasting notes on the back, which I personally never read. Doesn't say whether it's coloured or not, but the colour of that colour is either a high proof bourbon, a sherry matured whiskey, or it's been artificially coloured. And it's neither of the first two, so I would guess that there's definitely been caramel going to this. Actually, with these whiskies that are often sold for the German market, it's always worth having a look on the tube as well. Because, and what I suspect is right, it does actually say on the back of the tube, mit Farbstoff, and that's probably not how you pronounce it. But as I've said on a previous review, in Germany they have to declare if they've put artificial colouring in a whiskey, and that's exactly what that means. So they weren't honest enough to say it in English, but in the German market where they were forced legally to say it, they have said that this is an artificially coloured whiskey. I'll also say that I don't particularly like these tubes. I'm feeling a little bit like a broken record here. It's like, how many things can you pick on this whiskey for? But this tube, it just seems a little bit cheap and old-fashioned and nasty. And I know the packaging doesn't matter, but this is a particularly ugly tube, isn't it? Especially when you compare it to these boxes. And these boxes are gaudy, with their little map in here, with a little circle on the map that possibly gives you a hint as to where it's from. Probably not. These boxes are a bit tacky and gaudy, but they are fancy. Whereas this tube, I just don't like it. Anyway, the bottle's nice. I don't like all the complete BS on the labels, but that is a nice shaped bottle, and it comes with a cork. See? I'm trying my best. I'm being positive about Lidl mystery malts. Don't expect that much more. There might be a little bit more. Let's get some in the glass and see how it noses. So, no comments at all on the colour there. So I am actually intending to do a video on this at some point, but I think that you can actually smell that there's caramel colouring in this. It's minor, and it's probably the sort of thing that you'd only notice if you'd had a little play with caramel colouring before, but I think that you can definitely smell it, because I think there's quite a lot gone into there to make that colour. And I don't like it, but there's nothing we can do about it. Apart from that caramel, I'm getting quite a brininess on the nose of this one. Also, quite a nice warm vanilla peat, the sort of thing that you get in some of the lower ABV Laphroaigs like the 10-year-old. And to be fair, there's quite a complexity to the peat on this one. I'm getting some nice notes of sort of farmy peat, cow sheds, as well as some iodine-y antiseptic notes from the peat. It's also heavily vanillaed though. There's a lot of vanilla in this, and it makes you wonder if this whiskey has come out a little bit on the mild side, because it is mild, and they've dumped it into some fresh vanilla casks to try and boost it a little bit before they bottle it, because there really is heaps of vanilla on the nose of this one. There's also quite a nice floral note, and the floral note in this one I actually really like, because it adds a nice touch of complexity to the nose. Lots of caramel. And again, some of that briny, salty oak. So the nose on this one, it's mild, especially considering how peaty it is, because there is quite a bit of peat. But despite that peat, it's still quite a shy, underpowered nose. Let's see how it tastes. So the palate on this one, the first thing I'm going to say is that it's thin. Even though the reason why I bought this one, why I gave it a chance, is because it's bottled at 43%. But in a blind tasting, I would never guess that this is a touch over 40. And it's even mild compared to some whiskies that are bottled at 40%. What there is on the palate of this one is some rather nice, warm vanilla peat notes, again, similar to what we got on the nose, and also some notes of cough candy, sort of aniseed, slightly medicinal confectionery notes, a bit like what you get in some Bowmores. And that's actually not the end of the comparison to Bowmore, if I'm honest. I'd say that the way that it's so mild and shy and middle of the road really reminds me of some of the lower end Bowmore products, and that tends to be why I don't buy the cheaper lower end Bowmore products. There is some rather nice salty briny oak on the palate of this one too. And it has to be said that me personally, I am a bit of a whiskey age snob, bit of an aged whiskey connoisseur. I do like my higher age statement whiskies. I love whiskey in sort of the 18 to 25 year old range. And one of the reasons for that is that not only do you get more complexity, but you start to get certain flavours that you only get from spending sort of 15 plus years in a cask. And I often identify those flavours as an aged oiliness to the malt flavours in the whiskey, and there's a little bit of that in here, to be fair. It doesn't taste extraordinarily old unless you look for it, but there are signs there that this is a 16-year-old whiskey. It definitely doesn't taste young at all. It's definitely well matured, but despite how well matured it is, it's just a little bit weak. Another thing that you do get on the palate of this one, though, that I do quite like, is that there's a little hint of mint. And that hint of mint is something that I quite often get in a Laphroaig whiskey. And I think the mint notes in the palate, they do a similar thing, just adding that little point of interest, a little bit of complexity to the palate, the same way that those floral notes on the nose add a little bit of interest. So that's quite nice. I'm just going to have another little sip and have a look at the finish. So as for the finish, there are lingering peaty notes, but if it wasn't for that peatiness, it really is over quite quickly. It's quite a thin finish, dies off too fast for a 16-year-old whisky in my opinion. Too fast for a 43% whisky as well. I really am quite shocked. I expected better than this for a 43% whisky, but sadly I haven't got it. There's also some cough candy, again aniseed, fisherman friend type notes on the finish, and a little bit of wood spice as well. But it's not a strong, overpowering wood spice like you'd get in a quarter cask finished whisky. It's more like a curry powder wood spice. And again, that does make me wonder if that's a sign that this whisky has been re-racked into some fresh oak, either fresh bourbon wood or possibly shaved, toasted and recharred bourbon, something like that. Something to try and give it a kickstart and put some extra flavour in there quickly to make it that little bit more saleable. So, where is it from? That's always going to be the big question every time people buy these, especially Islay Mystery Malts. What distillery does it come from? Now, my usual guess for Islay Mystery Malts is Clydesdale, but I don't think in a million years that this is from Clydesdale. It just doesn't have that spirity note. It's not complex enough to be from Clydesdale. I just don't think it fits the distillery profile at all. A little bit of me wonders if it might be some slightly substandard stock from Bowmore, but I think it's really that cough candy, aniseed, fisherman's friend note mixed with that sense that it's slightly underpowered, just makes it slightly reminiscent of some of the underpowered Bowmores. But I don't think this is Bowmore. I think it's probably Laphroaig. To me, there are strong similarities in this whisky to the Laphroaig QA cask, which was another underpowered Laphroaig. I really feel like if you took the Laphroaig QA cask and aged it for a few more years to bring it up to 16 years old, you'd probably get something a bit similar to this. So the next question on everyone's lips is it worth £35? Now, I'm going to give this whisky a C, I think. It's just not good enough to go into the B category. It's firmly in the okay, adequate category, which is about what I would give a C to. So is it worth £35? It kind of is. I think if you're the sort of person that normally drinks Laphroaig 10, or the sort of person that enjoys a Laphroaig 10 without pulling your hair out because of how underpowered it is at 40%, it's probably safe to say that you'll like this one, because it's an enjoyable whisky, but it has the same problems that Laphroaig 10 has, being bottled at 40%. And if you're okay with that, you'll probably appreciate this one, because it possibly has, I'm going to be bold and say, it has more going for it, more complexity due to the higher age statement than the Laphroaig 10. And let's be honest, if you are the sort of person that maybe you're starting out and Laphroaig 10 really floats your boat, you're not going to find a 16-year-old Islay age statement whisky in the £35 range. So for someone like that, this is probably good value for you. But, and this is the thing that really kills this one for me, the fact that it is so mild, even at 43%, I think you really have to forget about the nice age statement on this and compare it to other things that you can get for that mid-30s price point, especially when you compare something like this to something like Smokehead, which is one of my favourite bargain mystery malts from Islay. The Smokehead, which I have actually done an A/B tasting off camera against this, the Smokehead just has so much more intensity. You can tell that the Smokehead is a slightly younger whisky, but it's not an immature whisky, and it just has so much more going on than this mystery malt from Lidl. So my closing statement on this one is going to be that, as with most of these supermarket age statement mystery malts that all seem a little bit too good to be true, they probably are a little bit too good to be true, and there's usually something that is more deserving of your money, but still not too bad an effort. Thanks for watching. Cheers.